All right. I'm going to go to, and we're also recording. All right. I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Mac and I will get started.
Thank you very much, Desmond. An earlier version of this presentation listed Dr. Kirk Kettleson, another faculty member here in the BSU School of Public and Population Health. So if you came expecting to see Kirk, apologies, you'll have to struggle through with Desmond and me for today. But we're delighted to have you all here today to talk about data visualization. It is a topic that we're all excited about and looking forward to talking a little bit more about it today. Just as a couple of overviews, reminders, whatever, I'm hoping folks who registered for this session in advance should have received today a Excel file and a couple of content links. We will also work to put the links to those into the file, into the chat window here. If I could ask Haley to please work on that while I'm going through some sort of kickoff slides here. After I'm done with that, we will turn to back to Desmond to run us through some sort of sample data and work on improving visualizations. And then we will turn to working together on an Excel, some data in an Excel file and working to improve how we visualize data and how we talk about it, how we think about it, all those things. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen here. And so today we are talking about communicating complex data through effective data visualization. And I just wanted to credit for a lot of the material for this work comes from Stephanie Evergreen, Carl Bergstrom, and Jevin West. Stephanie Evergreen in particular is the author, the creator of two of the handouts that we sent over. I had the good fortune of having about a week-long training session with her in a previous life at a health department. So truly cannot recommend her stuff enough. She comes with a practitioner lens. So it's definitely not like the academic side of things. It's geared towards communicating clearly to a diverse range of audiences. So I think that's going to be hopefully really helpful for us today as a framework. So I want to talk a little bit about sort of why we're doing this, sort of some theory and guiding principles here. So data visualizations at least can tell a story. They should, and they do tell a story. They need to tell a story that accurately reflects the data. I'm assuming that we're all here because we want to use data visualizations to accurately reflect our data, not to like, obscure, obfuscate, mislead with our data. So that's what our presentation is going to be here. And we're going to be using visualizations in a way that audiences will be more likely to understand and follow and accurately interpret our data and the story that we're trying to tell. So it follows then that we have to know what we're trying to say and we have to know our audience. Right, we cannot do data visualization if we don't know our audience and we don't know the story that we're trying to tell. And again, I don't mean story like a fiction or like we have a thing that we're trying to say and let's go find data to prove our point or something like that. We start with the data and we figure out what story the data are telling, and we tell that story using effective data visualization principles. So some principles for data visualization. First and foremost, again, this is thanks to Stephanie Evergreen, who's a data visualization expert and consultant. If your organization has extra funds lying around, she is a good use of those. It's not affiliated with her in any way. I've just really enjoyed the chance to learn from her over the years. Simplify to emphasize. Taking things away is extremely helpful when we are wanting to emphasize certain points of our presentation, of our data. Simplifying really, really, really helps. Taking away extra clutter, extra anything really helps. People skim when they read. It's a fact of life. Not everyone reads literally every single word all the time. We're all busy. We're all, well, I'm sure not everyone here. Some other folks are a little lazy. not because they're bad human beings, but because we're doing other stuff and we skim things. That's sort of the way that we encounter data, written stuff, information, pictures, whatever. So given that, let's take advantage of this. We know where people are more likely to be focusing their attention, and let's tell the story there, not where they're going to be skipping over. I cannot emphasize this point enough that each graph or graphic should have one clear takeaway. It should not have 2 or 47 or a whole bunch of stuff, and we just let the reader figure out what's going on. Each thing has one clear takeaway. And again, this is more geared towards practitioners in sort of the public health or population health practitioner world, less geared towards academics. It would be sort of a separate presentation towards academics, but it's still, it's not like it's different. It's not like each graphic shouldn't have a clear takeaway if you're in academia. It's just a little different. So when we're choosing a chart, we're going sort of into the principles now, but when we're choosing a chart, this is again that principle of we know where people are going to read and where they're going to skim over. Let's make it easier for folks to understand by focusing what our eyes are good at interpreting and avoiding what our eyes are bad at interpreting. So for example, a pie chart is extremely hard to make sense of because our eyes are not great at making sense of area. Our eyes are better at making sense of how long something is or what direction something is pointing in. You can also get some really sort of funny, really bad graphs. Here we can see a pie chart is very ineffective at visualizing these data. One of my favorite things when I used to teach this topic as a bigger part of a whole course was to just spend like portions of whole class sessions pointing out bad graphs and laughing about them with students and stuff. But we're not going to do a bunch of that today. We will do a little bit of it though, because it's just kind of fun. This is a terrible graph that we're looking at right now. Fonts we can also use to emphasize certain things or make things clearer to read, easier to read if it's like on a big board somewhere or it's just, in a written report somewhere. And colors also we can use strategically to emphasize or de-emphasize certain things. So we do not use a rainbow of colors to emphasize a multitude of different things. We need to be purposive, use and change colors only when we have a specific purpose to do so. And remember, each graph has one specific purpose. So therefore, we should really be using one or at the most 2 colors. One lighter color to de-emphasize something, and then one brighter or emphasis color to emphasize something. We can also consider the psychology of colors. This is like a wonderful field to go down. I'm not a graphic designer, but if you just think of the feelings you get when you look at different colors, there is a psychology to colors. For ordered variables, things that go in order, they're always increasing with each category or always decreasing. Use an ordered color scale. It just makes it easier to remember that this is bigger than that just based on the shade of the color, rather than random, and we have to put it back in order in our brains. Graphics, it's more visually appealing to use larger graphics that go all the way to the edge of the paper or the presentation, the screen, whatever we're talking about. And by that, I mean this. So it doesn't work all that well with this border on this slide. In theory, I should not have a graphic that interlays with this border here. Maybe take this border off the slide. But it just feels a little different, feels a little more engaging when you have the graphic go all the way to the edge of the paper. Also consider the action within the image. You can see in this handshake photo here, we see 3 of the 4 people looking off the screen, looking away from the center of the screen. So our eyes will naturally follow the attention on the screen, sort of the action in the picture here. So focus the image towards where we want readers or audience's attention to gravitate. In this way, when I look at this image, I follow the 3 folks' eyes towards the side of the screen. And then I have to refocus my eyes towards the other end of the screen to read the font over there. Not a great idea. So what was better is this, right? Pointing the action, these three people's eyes towards the center of the screen. It makes it an easier transition for my eyes to go from figure to text. A pretty major caveat though, this is like a stock image of, I can't remember what I Googled to get this stock image, but it's just a generic stock image that I wanted to use for this point. Stock images are rarely actually helpful though, because they have they don't help tell a story. This is a handshake. My data are telling one story. This is a generic set of people unattached to my story, unattached to my data, unattached to my community. There's no reason for this to be here. It rarely helps to achieve the actual data viz goals. That doesn't mean we don't use anything, but just keep in mind that a stock image is not actually going to be all that helpful sometimes. Sometimes it's all right just to have this. Data graphics need to be about the data, not about decoration. Again, please, we don't do, I know these are popular in like the whatever USA Today and other places, just having some fun with data. I get, it's fine if you just want to know that you're having fun with data. If you're trying to actually present a story, a graphic like this is extremely misleading for a couple of reasons. One is this one on the left here is a table. We're just showing numbers, but it almost looks like the graph that's on the right-hand side, which is implying that the burger meat, I guess, is the length of the bar, and 22% is that burger on the top, and I don't know how the burger on the bottom supports all that. But then the one on the left looks very similar, but it's confusing, and it adds a barrier to folks understanding what we're trying to do. So we do not generally use this as just fun design for the sake of design. Talking about axes, the scale of our graph, and I'm kind of going through this quickly, but there will be a recording of this that's posted, so you can go back through these points and pointers. And there will be a checklist that sort of gets all these for us, so you won't have to remember each and every one of these. So if you're scribbling this down, you can take a pause for a second here. But axes are really important in graphs. That's the scale, or the thing, the line that goes on the bottom and the line that goes up, if we have a graph that has those. Axes are really important, and they can be exceptionally misleading, either accidentally or on purpose. So some rules of thumb, because again, I'm assuming that we all want to create good graphs that are not misleading, either accidentally or on purpose. So some rules of thumb. For bar graphs, axes should almost always extend to 0. It looks like an O, 0. I'm sure there are some exceptions here, but for the most part, axes should almost always extend to 0. Usually, we're using a bar graph to visualize the magnitude of values. So you'd want your bar graph to display the relative magnitude of the values. And I'll come back to that in a second here to make that a little bit less jargony. For line graphs, it's not the same principle. We don't always have to extend the axes to 0. Usually, we want to be able to visualize change in one thing as another variable changes. So the scale should be on a relevant and not misleading scale, the axes. So what that means is if we want to visualize, say, the average global temperature, the average global temperature should not be visualized from, say, 0 to 100 or 0 to 1,000 or whatever, because that's not an actual that's not an actual relevant scale, right? We're not able to actually see a change in that. We're putting a misleading scale by using 0 to the maximum. So in general, small changes, and you will know what a small change is, you the expert, should look small, and big changes should look big. It's a fairly simple principle there. But again, the principle that a bar graph should always extend to 0 is a little more cut and dry. The reason that a bar graph should almost always extend to 0 and this magnitude of values bullet here has to do with what's called the principle of proportional ink. So when we used to print things, if you still print things off of a printer, we used ink, right, to make the bar shaded. When a shaded area is used to represent a number, a numerical value, the area of that shaded region should roughly correspond to that value. So we should be able to assess how much more popular is the Bible based on the shaded area here, the amount of ink we use to shade this, versus the Diary of Anne Frank, Gone with the Wind, Twilight, Da Vinci Code, whatever. This is an example of a visualization that violates this principle, because we can see the Diary of Anne Frank, Think and Grow Rich, Gone with the Wind. The area of that should be shaded with ink is just this teeny tiny area above this line 0 here. The area that's actually shaded goes all the way down to the bottom of the visualization. So it suggests to a reader who is skimming, and again, people skim, that 27 is this whole length here, when really 27 is just this teeny length up here. And this is actually made worse because of all of the extra lines that they throw in there, but we're sort of getting away from the point here. Proportional ink means the size of our bars should be proportional to the value. So in order to do that, we almost always have to go down to 0 on our bar graph axes. Just please don't use 3D visualizations. They're really confusing. We're not great at interpreting area. We're better at interpreting length and direction. They also just like look a lot less cool than we think they do. They're easy to make because it's a one-button thing, but they just don't look that good. The only exception to this would be if you need to simultaneously show 3 variables, and it's possible that you might need to do that in that case, okay, but please just don't make a 3D pie chart. Just as a favor to me, please don't do it. So a couple of things. Then we can also avoid, if we're avoiding 3D, we can avoid shading, such as shown on the right here, excuse me, shown on the left here, the browner one. We can also see those bars don't go all the way down to 0. That's a no-no. And there's also a lot of space in between them. It's a little bit easier to compare lengths of things when they're right directly next to each other. So this is a principle we'll talk about as we move into the data visualization checklist portion of the presentation. And I'm going to skip right to that to avoid taking up any more time on this part. But the data visualization checklist that we circulated in advance here, again, this is from Stephanie Evergreen. This is publicly available on her websites. This is something that you can use and use consistently to make your visualizations effective or more effective. These are things that we can do to sort of clean up some of the standard things that a visualization program such as, say, Excel will do that make it harder to interpret graphs. So this is some science and some art, right? It's okay, I'm giving you permission that not every single one of these needs to be rated a 2 every single time. Depending on the standards for your agency or your organization, some of this might not be possible, right? It might be a requirement that you have 3 colors, or it might be a requirement that you use certain types of labels and fonts and all that stuff. That's okay. It's also okay to sort of look at it and say, yeah, I know the principle is we should do it this way, but the expert in this topic, I'm going to do it this way. The reason that I'm going through this, though, is just I want that to be a purposeful decision so that we're not just using the default and then not really thinking about it and having no rhyme or reason for the way we're doing things. So we're providing this checklist, and we can go through it here in a second. Desmond will be guiding us through some examples of this. Go through this and point out what specifically is not great about a graph that we don't like, or what is good about a graph that we do like. It's a framework that we can continue to use. You can print this out, you can save it and whatever, and just use it, and a lot of the heavy lifting is already done for you. So I'm going to stop sharing. Desmond, are you ready to pick up here and talk through some of the EEOC data?
I am. I am. Is my audio coming through carefully, guys? Audio and video?
Yes.
All
Yep.
right. Perfect. All right. I'm going to turn my camera. Mac, thank you so much. Thank you very much for walking us through that. And also, thank you very much for sharing those files. I'll repeat. I believe that they're in the chat. But if you can't, see those, definitely let us know. I actually want to direct your attention to, I believe that that second file there, the data visualization checklist. There appears to be 4 pages on that. If you go down to the overall conclusions, and one of the big takeaways, we just want to make sure that when you're presenting a graph or table, it's the so what, right? Why are we actually looking at this? And I'm actually going to share my screen for a second, if I can help to screen 2. That would be it. Are you guys seeing this? It should be I can't see you, so just Mac, holler if you can't see it. It should see if you can give me just a
Yep. We got a
yes.
CNBC article up on the screen.
That's it. Perfect. So this is just to kind of highlight, something that we've heard, not just during an election year, but it's all the time. Jobs report, we've added, this many jobs to the economy. This particular report is less than 2 weeks ago, early this month. U.S. economy added 353,000 jobs in January, much better than expected, right? And it doesn't take a high level of critical thinking to say, well, what kind of jobs? Jobs among who? Like, how much are these high-paying jobs? Are these temporary jobs? This was every time I would hear this, I would always have those questions. I'm sure that many of you had too. For example, a job as a CEO or a senior official is very much different from a job at your local fast food service restaurant. Those are 2 very different, jobs, and these types of statements right here, they just kind of lump it all together and just leaves the viewer, asking for more. Fortunately, within the past few years, we've actually have an opportunity to explore those deeper level of analysis through data visualization. I'm actually going to put this website put it in the chat right here just for further consumption, because I think it provides just a great chart here. This is from the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it's a data visualization tool that they've recently provided because the data is so complex. Job patterns for minorities and women in private industry, basically a representative report of kind of the breakdowns of this data, right, to give you more granularity. And what we see here is at first view, right? We see employment by race, ethnicity. There's some great labeling as Mac went through. We also see it by gender. And what you can see here from this aggregate data is that across the United States, there seems to be relative, I would say, equity or equality within the sexes here, right? Overall, between male and female, among whites, among blacks, Hispanics, there seems to be about equal employment, within each race and by I think somebody stopped the recording. Okay, we're good. But those are fairly representative just by my, familiarity with the subject. But I would like to see those here. But diving into that question that we said earlier, well, what type of jobs? Actually look by job category. They actually have this ability here. So if you can click down, we saw aggregate, this is national, just overall job types, that kind of 353,000 figure. But if you click by executive or senior official, and then you click apply, it'll actually kind of break down, well, what types of jobs are individuals having within the United States? And one thing that you see here is that those bars change, right? Where we saw equality or equity within each sex gender, we see some stark differences, right? Among whites, now these are senior level officials, those CEO type positions. We see among whites that there are about twice as many men in those positions, over twice as many. We see among Hispanics, it's similar patterns, almost twice as many. Asian Americans, almost twice as many. So one is looking at that and saying, wow, in the United States, this is whether it's going to be indicative of sexism. You could actually see the data actually points to that. It could be, you just see very, very different patterns just basing on the labeling there. Just show you another example, just to be, very, very brief here. Those fast food service restaurants, we can actually click by service workers, so we can see what the data look like here. And just the way this presented. And we see, the opposite. Among men, there are about twice as many women in those positions compared to men. And you see it all by race, ethnicity. So just gonna, pause there and just show you the value of when you actually break data down in a certain way, in the way that you visualize it, when you look at those positions beyond the job category as opposed to the aggregate, when you just flesh it out and you ignore the visualization and you don't divide by those categories, you won't see those interesting patterns that can say, hey, well, this is indicative of a certain disparities that help you look further into the data. All right, I'll stop sharing. Mac, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Desmond. So I'm going to go and do a little bit more now in terms of, we understand sort of some of the principles. And as Desmond mentioned, we understand that we need to figure out what data visualization goal we have, what story we are interested in telling based on our our honest read and assessment of the data. And then once we do that, we can make a visualization better. We can make it better than just the standard. We can improve our own, we can improve others. We can do it in a way that will make sure that people don't misunderstand our data, and do it in a way that makes sure that that makes it more likely that people will actually have an easier time reading it. So I'm not getting into sort of the accessibility and readability issues in this presentation. That would be a topic for another day. But there are just general principles that we can use when we are visualizing our own data. So I'm going to get back into our presentation here. So once we have some data, if you guys take one thing away from this talk, I guess there's a few different things you could take away, but please, one thing to take away: do not just open up an Excel document and just do insert chart, right? It's wonderful that Microsoft Excel put in a recommended chart button. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, you know this button. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll see it here in a minute. Please don't use it. I know there's been wonderful advances in AI recently. I'm sure we will get to some future state where all we need to do is, like boot up our computer with our brains and then get our Excel document open with our brains and then hit a recommended chart and everything will be fine. We're not there yet. So we still have a lot of value as analysts, as community experts, as topic experts in public health. We are more talented than the recommended chart button. You are more talented than the recommended chart button. So again, start with what your goal is, right? Know the data goal that you have. It's not enough to just open a data set and start thinking about charts. So to that end, we have provided a chart chooser for you guys here. And again, this is Stephanie Evergreen's materials. The thing that I really like about this, one is it by looking at this many things this close together, these simplified views of these different graphs, you can just get a sense of what some of the options are. You can also see some of the general principles that we talked about in the first portion, right? We're using 1 or 2, sometimes 3 colors to emphasize and de-emphasize things. We're using bars and lines much more so than like pie charts and things like that. There's specific types of graphs that we can talk about here in a second. But the thing that we do is we start in this, if you're looking at it on a screen, it's clearer. But we start with these boxes running down the left side here, right? What is my goal? My goal is I want to compare something to a target. Oh, well, let's go compare to a target then, right? We can put a benchmark line in and then look at whether we're above or below that. We want to look whether things changed over time. Well, let's look down in this area. There's 6 options here. So we know our goal, then we can pick a chart type, and then we are on our way, right? Suddenly we've compressed the universe of visualizations down into something where we know what we're going to do, and we have a data visualization checklist, and we know how we can do it effectively. So hopefully that takes a lot of the burden, stress, anxiety, whatever, out of doing data visualizations and doing them well. You don't have to remember every single thing that has ever been talked about in terms of data visualization. You just need to remember that you start with this chart type chooser, choose the chart type, make the chart, and then improve it using the checklist. So again, this is just sort of an expanded view of what that chart chooser looks like. Some of these are easier to make in Excel and other data visualization programs. Some are substantially harder. I'm not going to get into doing some or all of these, anything beyond the basics in Excel in this presentation. If there are specific ones that you have a lot of interest in, for example, these dumbbell plots are really, really, really helpful. They're also really hard to make in Excel. These diverging bar visualizations are also popular and hard to make in Excel. My recommendation, one, is we're always happy to chat further about this. We just don't have the time today, and it's sort of a general interest session anyways. But reach out to us. We'd be happy to work with you on it if there's something specific you have in mind. Two is Google is your friend. Just Google diverging bar Excel, and there's almost certainly, not almost certainly, I know there is because I've done this too. There's a wealth of YouTube videos, and you can just follow along using YouTube. Again, we have other types of charts here. So just in case it's not totally clear how I propose going about this. So what could be appropriate for the following type of visualization? Like, I've been at a lot of community meetings that I've been hosting this year, and I feel like our meeting attendance has been improving this year, better than in the past. So I think things have changed over time. And then we have 6 options in that line of the data visualization checklist. So let's do a line graph, in our chart chooser, not the checklist. There's 6 options in the chart chooser. A line graph would work. Others would probably work too. And this is where the principles that we've been talking about apply most directly, right? We have a line graph here. You don't have to use a line graph. That's just one of the options. We also might want to think about maybe something like, I just made these up, so you can think about whatever you want. But like if it's really snowing or icy or a wonderful day outside, how does that impact attendance? So comparing a couple of things, comparing 2 or more things, choose from one of those options. We could do something like a side-by-side visualization. You might want to do something else. Patient satisfaction before and after being offered enrollment in a care coordination program, right? We oftentimes want to visualize how something changed before versus after something happened. Multiple different ways. I'm not going to sit here and say there's one right and many wrong answers. There's multiple ways that we could do this, and all of which can be an effective way of visualizing this. So you might want to look at the showing survey responses, comparing things to a target, or, hey, things changed over time. The sort of whatever words of motivation that I have for you here is you will know which of those 3 is best. You will know if you want to look at patient satisfaction because you're trying to hit a benchmark in order to receive a certain payment milestone, or because that's the goal for this year. If you are doing this because you want to hit a milestone, visualize how things are comparing to a target. If you are just looking to display something, showing a survey response might be good. You would also know if there's a reason why we should or shouldn't look to how things have changed over time. So use that topic knowledge and leverage that in combination with this chart chooser and data visualization checklist. So let's roll up our sleeves here a little bit. I'm going to do a much abbreviated version of this, but I did want to provide some resources so that we have something that we can talk about in a common language. And we don't have time to get into all of this today. This would be more like ordering on a whole course to do a full treatment of this topic and do all of this practice yourselves, but you now have some data that you can practice visualizing. One thing that's not very realistic about this is data that you're just just been dumped on your laps. And it's probably for a topic area that you're not as familiar with as you are your own job, your own topics. So consider this sort of the worst case scenario. If you came in and on a Tuesday morning and your boss dumped some data on your desk and said, work with this. Ideally, that's not what happens, but sometimes it is. So I'm going to stop this share and I'm going to pull up directly from the chat the data for BSU SPPH continuing ed. Data viz. And I'm curious how we'll all feel when we open this, because you open it up and it's a pretty sizable data set. It is, if it opens for you the same way it opened for me, it is a large data set that has 6,000 some observations. And you can scroll all the way over here and there's data that goes as far as the eye can see. This is intimidating, right? If you're not seasoned with big data sets, this may be one of the larger data sets you've ever seen. But this is all of the responses from folks in Idaho to the BRFSS, Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. It's a regular CDC survey that goes out to all 50 states. I just extracted the Idaho responses for the most recent version. And even that is pretty intimidating, right? Data as far and wide as the eye can see all down here. To keep us moving, I just extracted some selected social determinants of health data. And then I renamed it and made it a little bit more user-friendly. None of this is rocket science. At the same time, all of it requires more sort of computer typing that we'll be doing today. But all of these variables, all of these lines, excuse me, all these rows represent different individual people. This is a urban dwelling, white, non-Hispanic male who's age 78. They report that they never feel stressed, they never have transportation barriers, never have difficulty paying bills, are never food insecure, have not lost employment in the last 12 months, and never feel isolated. So you can go down the same exact thing with all of these. So ideally, you would not be thrown into this data as I'm throwing you in right now. Ideally, you would have some reason that you are in these data, some reason that you're looking through BRFSS data. If you care about social determinants of health, for this sake of social determinants of health, that's wonderful. But maybe you work for a transportation coalition who's working to reduce transportation barriers in rural areas among an elderly population. So we know that those are our three variables, our key variables there. Or maybe you're looking at food insecurity among Blacks or Hispanics, or food insecurity among younger females. Whatever the thing is, I'm hopeful that you have a reason that you're in here. And again, if social determinants of health data are not your thing, there's a whole bunch of other variables in here that you can go back and look at. But let's say, sorry, this is like a very egregious violation of all of the principles I talked about in the first half of this lecture. I just wanted to be sure that I could easily refer to different graphs, like the dashed green graph and the purple graph and the red graph. Do not present this to a wide audience and expect that their eyes would like what they're seeing here, as I'm sure your eyes took a minute to adjust here too. I wanted to put together a few examples that we could just talk through. So let's look at transportation barriers for urban versus rural areas, right? If our goal is to visualize something related to social determinants of health for persons living in urban versus rural Idaho, and I get these data. This is the real data that actually come from this worksheet. I've just simplified it for you so that you don't have to go down 6,000 rows and count it. For those of you who are a little bit more familiar with Excel, I use a pivot table for this. If you're not familiar with Excel, don't worry about that. This is the real data. And so what I did was exactly what I told you not to do, according to this green screenshot here. I clicked on recommended charts, and look what Excel helpfully provided for me. It helpfully provided something that is very confusing to me. I don't know exactly what to make of this. It takes a long time for me to, my eyes, my brain, to piece together what the heck is going on here. This is correct. Every single thing in this visualization is 100% mathematically correct. Every one of those bars is exactly the height that it should be. They're all corresponding to exactly the right cells they should be. And this is a very bad graph. So that's why I'm saying, while in a future world, we can just click recommended charts. We can use AI for all this stuff. Today, we need to leverage our expertise. We need to leverage the story that we're trying to tell, which we have up here and the first slide, which we have definitely done before we get to this stage. So I know I'm violating a lot of the principles that I talked about. I'm doing it because otherwise I'm just going to talk and then we're going to sign off and then you're going to go about your day and it's not going to have any impact and you're going to have anything to sink your teeth into. So let's look at how we could make this graph better. So if we go on to this next worksheet here, again, these data are correct. These data are absolutely 100% mathematically correct. They're not any different than these data. All I did was I just calculated what percentage of urban versus rural residents faced a barrier, not how many raw people did. So what percentage of urban versus rural folks, respondents, faced a transportation barrier? I did not know what the answer to this would be before I visualized this. So when I say, what story do you want to tell? I did not come to this saying, I need to be able to tell that rural residents face a lot of transportation barriers. I came to it with the question of let's learn more about barriers in this population versus that population. And the story that my data tell, again, this is a nonfiction story. The story that my data tell are that, as shown in figure 1, transportation barriers were uncommon for respondents living in both urban, sorry, that was a typo, urban and rural counties. And for the eagle-eyed among you, you'll recognize that the numbers are 6.2 and 6.5. You'll recognize that there are still some things that I did on this graph that violate the data visualization checklist that we talked through. I did that, one, because, well, one, to be blunt, I just ran out of time, but also because I wanted to give a little bit more wiggle room than that checklist implies that there is. It is okay, you have my permission, to present a graph that looks more like this than one that is literally to the letter, exactly conforming to the data visualization checklist. Really, though, what I want to be able to do is have one visualization tell one story clearly. One thing that I do more of, since I am at least partially based in academia, is I am prepared to answer audience questions with the graph. So you can see what I've done here is I've added in 2 clarifying statements, because a lot of times, as soon as you show a visualization, you'll get a hand shooting up, or a virtually or in person, whatever. And folks will say, what do you mean by urban? What do you mean by rural? You know, what is a transportation barrier? Tell me more about this. Tell me more about that. Who was the respondent? All of this is fair game, right? If you are presenting data, you are, at least to an extent, responsible for understanding those data. So what I did to figure out what they meant by urban residents was I looked up the data definitions. I went back to the Burfus data and I looked through, okay, what was the actual specific question they asked? What was the actual specific definition they used? I didn't know this prior to, as of when I created this graph, I did not know any of this. As of now, I know that Burfus classifies respondents living in urban or rural according to a 6-category classification scheme. And in this specific context, micropolitan and non-core counties are considered rural, while all other county types are considered urban. I am not saying that is the only way of thinking about urban and rural. I'm not saying that that's exactly the way I would do it, or is not the way I would do it. All I'm saying is that if we use these methods, these are the data we get. This is the only takeaway of these data that the sort of the author of this, the creator of this data visualization, think is worth emphasizing in this graphic. So again, when I see this graph, I am confused. I feel frustrated, in part because of who I am, but also because it's just a lot of work. We're all busy. I don't want to spend so much time on this. This is just a lot. And I'm frustrated because I know that means someone just did the laziest possible way of doing this. Just highlight it, click insert, and then click recommended chart. And you can see, oh, wow, this one would have been even worse. Wow, look at that. So at the very least, I picked an okay version of the recommended chart, I guess. This one is similar, but there's more labels. So moving on here, actually, let me, in the interest of time, let me skip over number 2, and let me go right to number 3, which is almost always we will want to do some sort of presentation about the demographics of whoever we're talking about. I calculated the average age, again, using a pivot table, the average age of respondents by a combined race ethnicity category that is provided in this data set, and also respondents reported sex. And they just report sex as a dichotomous here. They don't have any other data available on gender expression. So this is what I have. I went in here and I didn't do recommended chart. I clicked the thing that actually might be the appropriate visualization type, except I used a 3D bar to make myself frustrated for some reason. And this is what I get. And again, this makes me frustrated because it's confusing and it requires a lot of interpretation and work on my part, on the part of the audience. Please don't do that to your audience. To the extent possible, make their jobs as easy as possible to make sure that they will make it all the way through your report or all the way through what you're asking them to do, and that they will leave with the mental energy to retain the information rather than exhausted from reading it. So what did I say that the recommended visualization for this one is? I said, don't do it. A couple of things. One is when you have data like this, where it's just a whole bunch of numbers and you don't really have a story to tell, right? I'm not asking you to interpret 41 versus 49 versus 41. I'm just saying, here are some numbers. That's not really a story that needs to be visualized all the time. It can be. I'm not saying it cannot be. It can be visualized. But the story that I want my audience to take away after looking at these numbers is that on average, the overall average of all respondents was 53 years old. White non-Hispanic residents, these folks down here, tended to be somewhat older. And as an academic, I was pretty particular with that word. I did not say significant or substantially or whatever. I just said somewhat, a little bit older. Other races and ethnicities tended to be somewhat younger. That it can be kind of seen in here. It's not always true for everything. That's why I use some of these cheat words like tended to be and tended to be whatever. That's what I want the takeaway from this to be. You may disagree with that. You may have a different takeaway you want. That is okay, as long as it's not factually incorrect, of course. Maybe you want to point out that, I don't know, Asian non-Hispanic and Black Hispanic and Hispanic tended to be, slightly younger or whatever. Sure, fine. All I'm saying, though, is let's not force it. If it's not working, let's just take a step back, reconceptualize, again, what is the story that we're trying to tell? What story do the data tell? Who is my audience? And what do I want them to take away from this? Once I have that in mind, I can go back to the chart chooser and choose the most appropriate chart. In some cases, it may be nothing. And once I have the chart, I can use the data visualization checklist to make a better chart. So that is what we wanted to cover today. If you have any questions or comments, concerns, whatever, now is the time for us to just chat a little bit. We do have just a little bit of time remaining for today. Feel free to follow up with Desmond or me or anyone from our team as helpful necessary. But again, you do have these resources now available to you, right? The evergreen things, the visualization checklist and the chart chooser, along with some sample data that you can play around with. So let's see, any questions, reactions? Feel free to drop in the chat or take yourself off mute and raise your hand, whatever, however you want to make yourself known. Thank you, Gina. I'm not sure if, for those of you who came on a little bit late, the Stephanie Evergreen materials are, Stephanie Evergreen is a data visualization sort of expert consultant person. I was fortunate enough to get some training from her at a previous health department I worked at in a previous world. She does provide trainings and whatnot. I have no affiliation with her at all. Other data visualization checklists and presenters are also helpful. So if that's something, if you guys had like at the end of the fiscal year, you have a bunch of training dollars left over, that might be a reasonable place to get some expert training in. It was helpful for us. We did this pre-COVID. And so then when COVID hit, we could come up with a dashboard that we were pretty proud of without a ton of extra work.
All right. Well, seeing no questions in the chat, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute and present those. But thank you very, very much, Mac. This was definitely enlightening for me, and I'm sure for all of our attendees. As particularly as I love the feature on the kind of choose your own, chart, thing that we see, because it seems like, well, the software is telling me to do it, then it must be trusted. But so I think having the visualization checklist is definitely going to be something I employ and adopt going forward. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. If we this is our 5th of our 6th session for this academic school year. Next month, we're actually going to have a follow-up to one of Mac's previous presentations. If you attended the presentation on a public health return on investment, assessing and communicating, that was held this past December 12th. We promised part 2 of that series, and that's what we're going to be doing next month on March 12th, 12 p.m. noon through 1 p.m. We're going to go through part 2 of that. So please do plan to attend. You will receive an email blast from that, and you'll also receive a follow-up survey from today to gauge your interest, and also provide your insights and feedbacks into future topics that you would love to learn about. So with that in mind, we'll give you a few minutes back into your day. But again, please do complete the survey. And thank you very much to all those in attendance. And thank you very much, Mac, for outstanding presentation today.
Thanks very much, Al.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Bye.